I like Sword Art Online. It's a fun anime with heart that manages to take on a surprising number of complex ideas, all set in a compelling fantasy world. Not everyone can be saved. Some humans are crazy or just plain evil. Meaning can be found in the smallest of things, like taking the time to fish in a virtual MMO. Some crushes are never going to be reciprocated, and some people, well, they don't really care about anyone else. I'm not just talking about the murders either. There's some really creepy stuff going on in here.
Wow, it's very nice.
But how do I go about this? I don't want this video to come off as overly critical of the series because, again, I really do like it, and I think it gets too much criticism as it is. It's a kid's show that touches on deeper ideas without spending excessive amounts of time obsessing over them. On top of that, my past experiences with saying negative things about beloved IPs, they just haven't been met with the warmest of receptions, and I get that. Who wants to see an anime they love get torn apart by some nobody on the internet? Fans can be very passionate. But I do think the Alfheim arc falls short of delivering on the promises made in the first half. It doesn't fail, per se, not completely. Each time I've watched SAO, I've had fun with it, and the fact that I've seen it multiple times, that should tell you something in and of itself, but Kirito's progress as a character kind of halts after episode 14. Almost everything before that feels like it's doing something. Even the cabin scene, which, very intentionally, brings the story to a halt. Life is a journey that's meant to be enjoyed. We shouldn't get so caught up in some end goal that we stop living our lives. It's why this early scene of Kirito and Asuna sleeping in the grass works so well, especially once we see how big an impact this has on Asuna in a later flashback. Sometimes the best course of action is to lay back, relax, and take no action at all, to enjoy the individual moments, and those we are lucky enough to share them with.
I was walking along and I saw someone taking a nap in the shade. So I tried lying down too, and you know what?
That was the best sleep I'd had in years.
And that's when I realized something. Even in a world like this, he was really living.
Every man dies. Not every man really lives.
Before SAO, Kirito, known as Kazuto in the real world, he's an unhappy loner. He uses video games as a form of escapism, but through the hostile trials thrown his way by this virtual world, he comes to realize the value of living in the moment, of not always trying to be somewhere or something else. Every life, every situation has a silver lining, and SAO, for all its harshness, is still filled with wonder. Yui's introduction further motivates our character by giving Kirito and Asuna a glimpse of what kind of a future could await them. The possibility of marriage, of raising a child. It doesn't matter that Yui herself is an artificial construct, that she's adopted, that she isn't their flesh and blood, just as Kirito comes to realize that it doesn't matter that he's adopted. Family doesn't have to be biological to be real. But enough praise for this show. I think it's about time I tore into it. Gently discussed my issues with the second half, beginning with his sister Suguha, aka Leafa. Don't get me wrong, Suguha should absolutely be in here. Her story is crucial to furthering Kirito's growth as a character, as he's felt like an outcast ever since discovering he wasn't born into this family. I don't even entirely mind the confusing romantic feelings she has for her brother. Probably not the best fit for this series. His relationships, they're already quite complicated. But there is something interesting here, and not entirely implausible. Kirito and Suguha had grown distant well before our protagonist got stuck in SAO, and it took him 2 years to beat the game. During that time, Suguha immersed herself in a similar MMORPG world in an attempt to better understand her brother's obsession, which is exactly what happens. Is it then that surprising that she would develop these inappropriate feelings for him? Or that this entire segment has probably left my few remaining viewers wondering why the hell I'm including any of this in my now off-the-rails anime critique? Which is my point exactly. None of this should be in here, or in this show. It does nothing to further explore Kirito's character, because the feelings aren't mutual. All it does is make reconciling with his sister more complicated. Given the circumstances, I don't know that reconnecting right now is even the responsible thing to do, knowing the emotional toll any kind of relationship is bound to have on her. How is he actually supposed to proceed? His very existence is breaking Suguha's heart, and there's nothing he can do to fix that. This inexplicable wrinkle not only impedes Kirito's ability to accept his family and his place within it, it leaves viewers squirming in their seats for really no reason. What's the payoff? Kirito's core obstacle from the very beginning is his self-doubt. He feels like an outsider, judged by everyone around him. He's uncomfortable with his family, not even acknowledging his sister when she leaves the house. He's uncomfortable with Klein, uncomfortable when the man brings up his other friends. He's afraid to intrude on their pre-existing relationship. This is also why it's so easy for Kirito to intentionally turn all his comrades against him after he takes down the Floor 1 boss. He prefers to work alone, so the sacrifice is minimal. Plus, he already blames himself for not being able to save those who've died. No one is harder on himself than he is. This becomes abundantly clear after Sachi and his other guild members are killed in episode 3. Kirito doesn't place any of the blame on the unfairness of the game itself. He doesn't blame the overeagerness of his other party members. He blames everything on himself. The fact that he hid his true stats from them, how that may have contributed to the strength of the monsters spawned. Half a year later, and he's still struggling with what happened, trying to find a way to bring his old guild members back, haunted by the curses he imagines Sachi throwing his way right before she died. But while the first arc does do some things to mend Kirito's self-hatred and isolation, it doesn't complete it. Asuna is still his only real friend. Klein, Agil, they're just useful acquaintances. Kirito still has a long ways to go if he is to fully reconnect with the world, which is why the loss of Asuna at the end of the first arc is so perfect. While she may be a big part of what's helped him grow within SAO, she's also a crutch. He doesn't feel the need for anyone else. Asuna's sudden absence forces him to act on his own, but the task of saving her isn't something he can do on his own. It's a great dilemma in terms of character growth. Timeout. Remember the line Kirito delivers in the opening episode?
In this world, a single blade can take you anywhere you want to go.
I just wanted to add that this is one of the best quotes from the show, because it sets up Kirito's entire character journey, the initial lie he believes about life and the game, that a person can do anything entirely on their own, the benefits he finds in partnering with another person, the realization that even that isn't always going to be enough. Okay, I suppose I've prefaced long enough. Let's get into what I'd actually change. Like our introduction to Leafa, it's way too coincidental. Of all the thousands of players wandering about in Alfheim online, he just so happens to bump into his sister Suguha on his first day in-game? What are the odds of that happening? 1,000,000 to 1? What's even the point of including it? They live together in the real world. They're already reconnecting through sparring, a bond that could be further strengthened through their new shared interest in gaming. Why throw in all these interactions in which they believe they're complete strangers? If it's just to showcase their connection in spite of not realizing their family, I don't think that message is quite as meaningful as the anime likely thinks it is. So I do away with this run-in altogether. Instead, it's up to Kirito to find the people he needs to help him. As in the original, Agil will be the one to show Kirito a photo of Asuna, but that's where the stories diverge. Kirito immediately tries to enlist Agil's help in reaching Asuna to figure out what's going on, but Agil hesitantly refuses, says he can't bring himself to put on the nerve gear again. It's an understandable reaction, a form of PTSD, especially since there's no proof that this is really the same girl Kirito fell in love with in SAO. A lot of traumatic memories to potentially reawaken based on mere rumors. The PTSD these characters inevitably must have gone through really isn't covered in here, and I think it should be, at least in passing. Fortunately, Agil does know of some people who might be willing to help him. Klein and his buddies. Remember that they were all members of a guild in a game prior to SAO, so quickly moving on to another game afterwards isn't unthinkable, especially since every one of them survived that ordeal. They can help guide Kirito to the World Tree and help him on his eventual ascent. Kirito reluctantly decides to contact them, something he never would have considered had he felt he could rescue Asuna on his own. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have the time to attempt that. He has 1 week before Asuna is to get married to this creepy guy, Suguha, who might very well end her life afterwards. Kirito needs to act now, and the only way to do that effectively is with help. Not only does all of this make sense in furthering the narrative, it's a major step forward for Kirito's character. It forces him to connect with others, to stop pushing his closest allies away under the assumption that he'll eventually disappoint them. And who better to showcase that than Klein? In the opening episode, it's Kirito who teaches him a few of the game's basic mechanics, and the two of them really seem to hit it off. Afterwards, Klein is so grateful, he invites Kirito to hang out with him and some of his friends in-game, because he already considers them friends. It doesn't work. Kirito remains too self-conscious to open up on that level, but Klein leaves the offer on the table.
I can always introduce you to him another time or something.
Yeah, sorry.
On top of that, Klein even promises to someday help Kirito out. Virtually, that is. Something Kirito never takes advantage of because, frankly, he doesn't really need to. Until now, in my rewrite. Just felt I needed to clarify that for some reason. Anyway, he calls up Klein, hoping to enlist him and his fellow guild members, and Klein immediately agrees. Kirito vigorously thanks him, but Klein just brushes it off. He says that's what friends do. The word surprise our protagonist. Kirito always felt guilty about not teaming up with Klein and his friends when they all got trapped in SEO, but the man's apparently never felt the same way. He always considered them friends. The parallels between this scene and the opening structurally tell us that Kirito is growing as a person. He's no longer turning down requests to team up with others, but actually requesting this team up himself. Amazing. Quick side note, yes, Kirito does in fact apologize for abandoning Klein and his friends right before taking on the final SAO boss. But that's only a first step. He's admitting he should have behaved differently.
You haven't changed one bit.
Taking on Kayaba Akihiko by himself. This scene also further cements Kirito's importance in the story, only to drop all that build-up in the second half. But our merry band still has one small problem. Kirito's spawn location and the current location of Klein and the others are not very close together, thanks to the glitch we already see in the show. Kirito is frustrated, not knowing what to do. He's lost and unfamiliar with how to play the game. He logs out and goes to the kitchen to grab a bite to eat, where he runs into Suguha. She notices his foul mood and questions him about it. Kirito hesitates. In this version, he already knows Suguha's been playing Alfheim online because why wouldn't he? It just makes sense. It's been a couple months since he woke up, and she's got a giant poster for the game in her room. Besides, wasn't her whole reason for playing the game to get to know him better? Nevertheless, Kirito hasn't mentioned needing to play Alfheim online to Suguha for fear of worrying her, which would be a very understandable concern on both their parts. But once again, his desire to do everything in his power to save Asuna overrides his fear of stirring up trouble. He tells Suguha the truth, half expecting her to dismiss his hopes as pure fantasy. She doesn't. Instead, his sister actually asks for his current in-game location. Apparently she has a unique item that lets her open a portal to any one location, one time, and she's willing to use it on him, no questions asked. The act means a great deal to Kirito. From here, our protagonist joins Suguha in Swellvane, the Sylph base of operations, and they begin their journey to meet up with Klein and the others about a day's march away. This gives Suguha the time she needs to teach Kirito how to play the game, and Kirito the opportunity to confess why he's been so aloof in the past, his sense of alienation. When Kirito meets up with Klein and his guild, naturally things start off a bit awkward. Kirito isn't sure what to say. But then Klein, being who he is, starts drooling over Suguha, a callback to the first episode, and Kirito once again kicks him in the groin. Now Klein's friends all start laughing and any prior tension is broken. I really enjoyed the relaxed interactions between Kirito and Klein in the anime's opening, and was disappointed when that didn't carry through. Now we have a chance to get some of that light-hearted banter back and explore some genuine friendships. Sure, they still need to rescue Asuna, the stakes are high, but if there was one thing he learned from SAO, it's that there are always moments worth enjoying, especially once Kirito realizes how many people genuinely care for him. Even without Asuna, our protagonist isn't alone. It would also help make the ending reunion scene a lot less awkward. doesn't really feel like Kirito wants to be here, does it? Which makes sense. These characters may have endured a lot together, but they were never really friends before. Now, at least some of them are. I'd primarily like to focus this section on building their relationships, rather than in any brand new conflicts involving new characters. That means no Katsi or Sylph armies. It'll just be a nice reprieve, with maybe a couple monsters. A taste of what life might have been like had Kirito teamed up with Klein in the very beginning, or what he's been missing by shunning his sister Suguha. It's the calm before the storm. Naturally, this is going to have an effect on the battle at the World Tree. Without the Katsi and Sylph forces joining in, the scale is going to be noticeably smaller. But I don't think that has to impact the underlying message. The important thing is that Kirito is cooperating with others. Heck, it's actually better if we don't have all these new additions in the final battle anyway, because the side adventures that get them involved in the first place always felt kinda tacked on to me. Kirito goes out of his way, lessening the time he has to reconnect with Asuna in order to intervene in conflicts he knows nothing about. On top of that, it isn't their numbers that get Kirito into the restricted zone of the World Tree anyway. It's simply because of the keycard he gets from Asuna. In fact, the entire World Tree quest is a sham, since it's impossible without cheating, and there's really nothing for players up there. Nothing but highly illegal experiments on imprisoned humans and tentacle monsters.
You look like someone I can have fun with.
Oh man, that's gross!
Okay, let's jump ahead to after Kirito saves Asuna, since most of the stuff up until that point works quite well. We see Kirito pull off his headset and let Klein and the others know he succeeded. He even calls Agil with the good news, telling him he's going to see Asuna at the hospital. Suguha overhears him and insists on going along with. In the hospital parking lot, our villain Suguha attacks Kirito and cuts him, but now our protagonist has his sister to back him up. She kicks Suguha's legs out from under him and places herself between the two of them, suddenly lamenting her lack of a kendo stick. The man laughs, he gets back to his feet and tosses the knife back and forth, relishing in this moment. Then, just before he has a chance to press his attack, Agil shows up and knocks our villain out cold. These changes serve several purposes. One, they emphasize that no one can do everything on their own. We all need occasional help. Two, Agil gets to help out and redeem himself in a way he seems naturally capable of. Just look at the size of this guy. And three, we get to leave someone in the parking lot to watch over our attempted murderer while the cops are called in. The show's decision to let him run off, that just seems ill-advised, even if Suguha is immediately caught. What the heck's up with me today? I keep messing up my recordings. Now, where was I? Oh, right. I can't help but feel that Kirito's actions here are pretty irresponsible. Suguha might go off and murder someone else. To wrap things up, the important takeaway here is that Kirito needs to make friends and realize he can depend on them. He needs to mend his relationship with his sister, to continue the growth he began while trapped in SAO and learn to say yes to the many wonderful experiences and people he comes across. Life is really pretty good. Too good to let slip away. Anyway, these are just some of my alternate ideas for the series. Feel free to civilly discuss them down below, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.